Much like barbarians, the cleric are another classic fantasy class that has a life in Dungeons and Dragons, and in my opinion, are a vital part of any adventure party. So let's talk about clerics. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. Today we're beginning our next big chunk of class breakdowns and subclass archetypes and such with the Cleric and the Divine Domains of the Cleric Class. So in today's video we're doing the basics of the Cleric, stuff that all Clerics should understand when they're playing that character class, and I'm talking about what they are, why I think they're so important, and some ideas on how you can build a Cleric for your game. In a nutshell, Clerics are basically holy warriors. They're kind of religious zealots that take up a mantle of a deity or a belief system that they have, and they go out to spread the word of that through their punching things in faces and preaching the good word. It's a weird balance of religious priest and fighter. It's a strange balance that they found, but that is basically the Cleric in a nutshell. Some things to keep in mind when making a Cleric or playing a Cleric is Clerics have a strong connection to their deity, which is determined also by their domain. So when you're making a Cleric, you're going to want to take a little bit of time to come up with the domain that you're going to want to play the Cleric as, and then find a deity that fits with that domain properly. It's going to take a little bit of research, but in the end, it's going to make for some good role-playing moments for you, and it just makes it kind of fun that way. Clerics are a spellcasting class, but their magic comes from their deities, not from something like wizards and sorcerers. We're not going to go into a deep dive of cleric magic in this video because I have another one on cleric magic and spellcasting, explaining how that works, which you can go watch. But just understand they are a spellcasting class, so that is going to come into play heavily in their class and how this class works. An interesting thing to know about clerics is sometimes they become adventurers at the will of their deity. Their deity tells a cleric or a follower, you need to go out and spread the good word, and so they do that. Not all religious worshippers become clerics. Similar to barbarians, where they were kind of the epitome of their tribe, of the greatest barbarians, and then they went on and being adventurers. The same goes for religious followers. Not all have what it takes to become a cleric, but those that do get sent out to adventure and help out and kind of spread and help out their deity in that way. Now let's go through the basics of a Cleric. First up, your hit dice, So now let's go through the basics of a Cleric. First up, the hit die is a D8, which is the same as a Rogue, and Rogue are generally squishy. So you can look at Clerics as kind of being a squishy class, but what they lack in hit points, they make up for in other areas that make them a little bit better, such as their use of heavier armor than a Rogue might use, plus also the ability to heal things makes up for their lack of hit points. We'll do a whole other thing on Rogue classes, but just know the D8 is the same as a Rogue, which is one of the lower hit die you can get in the game. You also find in the proficiencies of a Cleric that they're really limited to light and medium armor right off the bat. They also don't have proficiency in any of the martial weapon classes, only simple weapons. Martial weapons being a little more advanced items such as warhammers and long swords, I think, where simple weapons are more like short swords and maces, something more simple. They also have proficiency in shields, which gives them a big boost in their armor class and lets them be a little more sturdy on the front lines of battle. One thing I do want to point out, though, is some of the domains for the Cleric have extra proficiencies when you choose that domain, such as the Life Cleric gets proficiency in heavy armor, and other Cleric domains might give proficiency in certain martial weapons. So you need to think about that when you're deciding on your Cleric. The domain will determine what you're proficient in, and then that will determine what your starting equipment is, which we'll go over here in just a moment. In terms of skill proficiencies, the Cleric has available to them history, insight, medicine, persuasion, and religion. These skills are pretty telling because they're all kind of mental, social skills that the Cleric has. They're not really physical skills, so keep that in mind. You're not going to be the one breaking down the door necessarily. You're more likely going to be the one recognizing when someone is lying or convincing someone that you can help them out in a tough situation. Dealing with the ability score proficiencies for saving throws, you're having wisdom and charisma are your saving throws. Wisdom being its main ability score, the thing that it relies on the most, and charisma just being something that comes into handy when dealing with people, which is what clerics often do. they deal with people. Now, going down the equipment list for a cleric, the first option you have is either a mace or a warhammer, and the warhammer has the stipulation that if you're proficient. So a lot of clerics won't be proficient with a warhammer right off the bat, so you'll have to choose mace. It kind of makes it less of a interesting, fun decision, but if you are the type of cleric of the domain that lets you pick a warhammer, I highly suggest you do it, because there's really no downside to it other than you get a little more damage output. You get the opportunity to have versatile damage, which means if you swing it with two hands, you hit a little harder. It's kind of a no-brainer if you are proficient with a warhammer to just take it. In terms of armor, you have the option of leather armor, scale mail, or, again, if you're proficient, chain mail. Now, again, if you have a divine domain that allows you to be proficient in heavy armor, then you're going to want to go with chainmail, but keep in mind you are going to take a disadvantage on stealth checks while wearing chainmail because it's heavy, it's cumbersome, and it's probably pretty noisy moving around with it. The next option you have are a light crossbow and bolts, or any simple weapon. I personally would probably go with the light crossbow just to get some ranged damage. I've found through playing games, it's always good to have a ranged option for an attack, and I think a light crossbow with some bolts is a great straight-up option for a cleric, even though you're going to be spending most of your time casting spells, or using something like a spiritual weapon to hit people from a distance. It's just a really good backup weapon to have. Then, of course, you're going to get your priest pack or your explorer's pack. A lot of people will go with a priest pack because for flavor, it's a little more, it fits with the theme of the cleric. The explorer's pack, I believe, has a little more useful items depending on the campaign you're playing in. It's really your choice in that case. And the fun part is all clerics get a shield and a holy symbol. The shield adding a +2 to your armor class when you're using it. And the holy symbol is kind of how the cleric channels the divine energy into their magic. So however that holy symbol be presented is up to you. My cleric that I play, his name is Kearney Battlehammer, and he's a dwarf cleric, and his holy symbol is actually on his shield. So it's like the same thing, and he uses that to channel his magic and energies. Haven't played that guy in a long while, though. Now let's get into the class stuff we all get, or the class swag, as the kids call it, I guess, these days. These are the things that every cleric is going to get as in terms of class features, regardless of which domain they have chosen. And starting at level 1, of course, you have spellcasting, which I mentioned earlier. I already did a video about the cleric spellcasting. Go watch that for the full breakdown, but you get that at level 1. Also at level 1 is when you choose your divine domain. This is an interesting thing. Not all classes let you choose your subclass right at level 1, but for the cleric, it determines a lot about how your cleric is played, so that comes into play right away. Now, what is a domain? I've said that word multiple times in this video. Basically, in Dungeons & Dragons, the gods of the world have control or power over a certain aspect of the world, or of nature, I guess you could call it. And the aspects that they have control over are their domain. These are things like life, light, death, war, nature, knowledge. Those are divine domains that there are gods that watch over those parts of existence. This stems from like real life mythology stuff where you have different gods. The Greek gods, the Roman gods all had powers over a certain domain. Gods like Hephaestus have kind of a domain over foraging and creation. Gods such as Poseidon had domain over the oceans. So the different gods have different powers over different parts of existence, and that comes into play with the deity choice and how the cleric is played, which we'll get into in future videos. Going along with the divine domain, though, is you also get domain spells. Every cleric over the course of their game gets access to certain spells depending on the divine domain they've chosen. These are not necessarily always on the cleric spell list. They don't have to be, because they're focused on the domain that the cleric has chosen. So in terms of this game, they're just kind of free spells that the cleric always has. They don't really affect the amount of spells a cleric can have prepared. They're considered always prepared, and they're just useful extra spells that the cleric gets. Those are domain spells, which we'll go over again in each of the domain videos. At level 2, you get the ability to use your deity's power and to channel their divinity into powerful spells or abilities. They're like magical effects that aren't really spells. They don't use a spell slot to cast, but you do have limited uses of them per day, and they're really dependent on which domain you chose. There is one channel divinity skill that all clerics get, which is called Turn Undead, which essentially means using your holy symbol and a prayer, any undead creatures within 30 feet of you have to make a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they are turned, or they have to run away from you. There is more details in that, but again, like everything, I want you to go read the books and learn about it. This is just a brief overview. Other domains will give you extra channel divinity abilities that you will also get at level 2 when you have that certain divine domain. At level 4, you get the chance to have an ability score improvement or a extra feat from the book, depending on your game master and how they want to run things. This again repeats at levels 8, 12, 16, and 18, so over the course of your time, you have the chance to have 5 different ability score improvements or 5 different feats, depending on how you want to play it. At level 5, your ability to turn undead becomes even more powerful and turns into destroy undead, which just sounds more cool. Essentially what that means is whenever you channel divinity to turn undead, if the undead fails their wisdom saving throw, instead of just being turned, they are destroyed if they are below a certain challenge rating threshold known by your dungeon master. There is a whole table in the book that explains your level and the challenge rating level of the creature. I'm not going to go into details on that, but just know at level 5 you're dealing with about a half of a challenge rating. So at level 5, you're really dealing with wimpy creatures that you can destroy, but it does get more powerful the higher level you get. At level 10, you have the opportunity to get Divine Intervention. Now, this is one of the bread and butter skills of a cleric that I think is underutilized and very powerful if done often enough. Essentially, what you get to do is use your action to pray to your deity to ask for some help. This is a lot of dungeon master discretion on this. It doesn't always work out the same way that the cleric might like, but it works out how the deity would want it to work out. That said, you use an action to pray to your deity, then you roll the percentile dice. The percentile dice are the 2 10-sided dice, that one has double digits, one has single digits. You roll those, and if the result you get is equal to or lower than your cleric level, then it is a success and your deity intervenes. At that point, the DM gets to choose how the deity intervenes, and if you are successful, you will have to wait 7 days to do it again. If it fails, you can do it again the next day. There is a common misconception, and I do this in my own games too, when players want to do a divine intervention, there somehow became this house rule that you roll the percentile dice, and if the result is higher than 100 minus the cleric level, then that results in the success. Basically, it's the same percentage chance of succeeding no matter which way you do it, but what it's written in the book says if it's lower than the cleric level or lower, that's written in the book, but a lot of people play it with if it's the 100 minus the cleric level. So, as example, a cleric of level 10, when they get this, would have to roll under a 10 to succeed on their divine intervention. Alternatively, the cleric would have to roll over 90 to succeed on the divine intervention. It really depends on the DM and how they want to run this rule. I've done it both ways. After several other levels of building your cleric and having things kind of improve upon over time, you reach level 20, where you're basically, what you get is the divine intervention always works. You never have to roll for your divine intervention. You just say what you want and the deity will help you out. Then you have to wait 7 days. That is pretty powerful, but it also kind of feels like a cop-out at times to think about it. You're not getting super uber powerful abilities, but at the same time, the divine domains give a lot of really powerful abilities and features, and also the cleric spellcasting becomes very powerful by the end of the 20 levels as well. So, getting free divine intervention is alright by me. Like I said, it doesn't seem like a whole lot is happening for the cleric here. You're basically just a few levels, you get some improvements, but then again, your divine domain comes into play and gives you new features at levels 2, 6, 8, and 17, so there's another big jump in there between 8 and 17 where it's just kind of slowly leveling up. But you'll see as we get into the divine domains, there's a lot of different customization that you can get with each of the divine domains. They all play a little bit differently right from the start, depending on what armor class you want, what weapon you want to do, what kind of magic you want to be doing. So it's really a customizable class for players. That's why I think Cleric is one of the more interesting classes. You actually have 15 divine domains. So like I'm doing this video, then I'm doing the rest of the domains. This is going to take 16 days of just Cleric talk. That's how much this is going to be. So it's a lot of information about the Clerics coming at you next. Tomorrow we are diving into the divine domains with Arcana, and we're going to just move through all the divine domains. So I've been Richard. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see on the channel, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. You can also click over here to see more videos in this playlist, or over here to see what YouTube suggests you watch from my channel.